9 years old, and I'm running around the city. I can't believe what I'm seeing. I'm seeing tanks in the streets, dead bodies lying in gutters, and this was all caused by the man who I adored and looked up to, the father of our nation, Joseph Stalin. My name is George Decsy, and I wrote this book. It's called The Reluctant Refugee. It's a story. People always ask, what's it about? That's the first question. It's about my family's escape from communist Hungary in '56, subsequent arrival and assimilation into British culture, the horrors of Catholic boarding school, an alcoholic stepfather. Well, it's a human story. You're going to get an experience of a 9-year-old boy running around a war zone in the city, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, actually. It's war-torn, there are bodies in the streets, there are flies crawling out of dead bodies' ears. It's not a pretty sight. And it's something that has stuck with me, and I felt compelled to write my experiences down for myself, for my children, and for the world. And I'm sure you will be interested in it. Yes, well, I was a fully committed young communist and a member of the young communist organizations, and my life revolved around these activities. And once the turmoil in the streets opened my eyes to the realities of the situation, it took me a while to come to terms with the fact that I had been so indoctrinated by the party, by the mechanism, by the establishment, that I actually believed everything I was told. And at some point there was revelation. It was like, this is all just a lie. It is not. I've been told this is true, but it's complete, utter nonsense. My revolution was in black and white. Now I'm seeing the same scenes unfolding in front of my eyes in full color. I wrote the book. When I first started writing the book, there was relative peace in the world. Now it seems everything is there's huge turmoil, death and destruction, especially in Ukraine. And it just reflects my own experience. So as I look at the news currently and see the war in Ukraine, I know there's another 9-year-old boy somewhere in that country experiencing the same thing that I experienced as a kid, and living in fear in a war zone. You don't know if you're going to make it through the next day. It's a hugely traumatic thing for a person, a kid, a 9-year-old kid to go through. And I feel a huge affinity towards the people of Ukraine and the horrors that they have to go through at this, due to the communists, again, trying to expand or maintain their empire. So the phone rings one afternoon, I pick it up, it's my mother. She says, "Your father is dying." She didn't mince her words. She was never one to mince her words. And I decided that this mysterious man, this ghost of a man who I've heard so much about but have never met, is on his deathbed, prompted me to start making arrangements to go and find him in Budapest. So after many false starts, I finally tracked my father down, and he was living in an apartment in Budapest. And I'd just like to read a couple of paragraphs from that occasion. The following day, at the appointed time, I presented myself at the Strohmeyer's flat. My father's wife let me in and led me silently to a small room near the front door. Coffee? I nodded. She left the room, heading presumably for the kitchen. I sat nervously. The sound of a radio from the adjacent room, a mixture of news and classical music, filtered through the wall. I waited. She returned with a tray with fine china cups and with dainty handles, coffee pot, sugar spoons and vanilla wafers. Seemed like they didn't have a lot of people dropping by. I thought she may have been enjoying this opportunity to give her best china an airing. In awkward silence she poured coffee. I sat and waited for her to speak. I think it will be all right now for you to see him, but you must not tell him who you are. I don't want him getting upset. She must have given it some consideration the previous night. Take this. In her hand was a tailor's tape measure. She looked at me intensely. I leaned forward to be sure I missed nothing. Your father has sat in that wheelchair for the last 15 years, listening to the radio, rarely leaving the flat. His welfare and comfort are my priorities. You will go next door and pretend that you are the man who we've been expecting to measure the windows for some new curtains. Do you understand what I'm asking you to do? Taking the tape measure from her outstretched hand, I nodded, drained my cup and stood ready to do her bidding. She opened the door to the sitting room, indicating for me to enter, turned and walk away. Stepping into the room from the corner of my eye, I saw a man sitting in a wingback armchair, a plain dark green blanket covering his legs. My nerves were shredded, but I remained, at least on the surface, icy calm. Intent on the radio, he paid me scant attention. I avoided looking at him, but took a quick scan around the room. It was a good-sized space, sparsely populated by chunky, turned furniture, more appropriate to a country manor than a flat in Budapest. The curtains were tatty, held back by grubby, frayed rope straps hanging at the side of two large windows. I went to work. Dragging the heavy ottoman over to the window, I started taking random measurements. I could feel his eyes boring into my back, but there was no reaction from him. No doubt he was wondering what the hell the world was coming to. People walking into your flat without so much as a good morning, standing on your Turkish heirloom with their smelly socks. The news segment finished and they started playing Beethoven's Fifth, which I felt was appropriately dramatic for the occasion. Fussing with the curtains, I continued to take inappropriate measurements. As the music rose to dramatic heights, he shut his eyes and raised his head. I took the opportunity to look him over. I think this is rambling on and not making much sense anymore, is it?
I was loving it. I'm like calling, we're
I skipped a couple of
I
paragraphs.
got lost in the story. I was like watching this.
Okay, well, so
unfold.
shall I just pick it up and
Yeah.
carry on? Altering my vantage point, ostensibly to effect a more precise measure, I again glanced around the room. There was a tapestry on the wall above his head, depicting a mounted knight in shining armour, impaling a winged dragon with a lance. The image jarred me back to Bexley-on-Sea and Father O'Reilly. Seemed like a few lifetimes ago. He sat intently listening to the music. A wheelchair was parked in the corner. As the music rose to dramatic heights, he shut his eyes and raised his head. I took the opportunity to look him over. Serene, composed, youthful, angular features, good skin tone. Perhaps in his late 60s, early 70s. Lush head of white hair, alert in a detached way and immobile. Having exhausted the measuring charade, I stepped down from the ottoman and briefly locked eyes with him. There was no sign of recognition. I rejoined Mrs. S in the small room next door. She was fidgety, rattling the cups on the tray as she tied it up. Was this it? Had I come all this way to merely look at him, and he not knowing who I am? Hard to live with that possibility, yet out of respect I felt obliged to follow Ingrid's wishes.